All right, hello everybody, and welcome to another new player guide. This time we are talking about Gwen Stacy, aka Ghost Spider. You know her from the Into the Spider-Verse films, and if you are a longtime fan, you know her as multiple characters. Well, obviously Gwen Stacy, Peter Parker's love interest, up until the point when the Green Goblin kills her in what was kind of a very defining moment in comic book history, ushering in a new age, a new darker age of comics where things weren't as light and airy. But that's not who we're talking about today. We're talking about an alternate universe version of Gwen Stacy who was bitten by the radioactive spider and gained the spider powers. She is a hero within our game. She comes out of the Sinister Motives box. And like I said, we're here to talk about her today. So without missing a beat, let's talk about Gwen Stacy, a 3 recovery alter ego character with the civilian trait and an action of choose to either shuffle Ticket to the Multiverse from your discard pile into your deck or ready George Stacy. This is limited to once per round. She has a 6 hand size and 10 hit points. I think this action in itself is relevant. It does come up from time to time. You do want to have George Stacy out as much as possible, so you should be getting a good use out of this. Other than that, she does quickly become just a alter ego that's kind of doing nothing. Ticket to the Multiverse will come up from time to time. I think that's the only thing that I had to say about the alter ego that's kind of a setback, is she has a decent enough hit points, kind of offset by a low recovery. Although once you started getting into like 4 or 5 recovery, you're kind of outside of the realm of what you would come to expect of a character like this. But not a whole lot to say, but that action will have some use over the course of the game. But let's talk about the hero form. So we've got Ghost Spider, a 1 thwart, 2 attack, 3 defense hero with the Web Warrior trait and dizzying reflexes, a responsibility. After you resolve an interrupt or response ability on an event, ready Ghost Spider, limit once per phase. So this is the main driver for what you're looking to do with Ghost Spider. Obviously, she has a lot of other skills that we'll see within her card pool, and she has a really good defense. And I think that's going to be really important. She has got a really good defense, and that's paired with the ability to shrug off any sort of basic activation to use that defense. I will say that her interrupt ability, her interrupt responsibility, really does push how you want to be doing your deck building. And I think that's what kind of limited me to protection for a long time. And even in today, as we talk about the example deck, I tried to find something that was aggression, just to sort of move outside of that, to really kind of look at something brand new that you can do with this character. But I do think that the basis of where you want to go is protection. And I think that there's a very strong reason for that. There is a lot of interrupts. There's a lot of responses on events. So you are going to be able to take advantage of this on a pretty regular basis, to the point where the example deck that I have for today had to kind of make some sacrifices to still fit within the allotted card pool and fit this aggression. And I don't want to say that I forced it, but I wanted to bring you all something new, something to go off of. Overall, I will say that, I suppose I also pointed out, she's got 5 hand size, 10 hit points. I definitely feel like Gwen is very strong, but that her power really lies more in the cards than the actual physical card Ghost Spider. She does a lot of really good. She does a lot of things really well, but I do think that we're going to see how important events are to her. She's very much like Gamora, who we'll get to eventually, in that events are very, very important to her, and in this sense, specific kinds of events. But let's talk about some of those events right now. So she comes with 3 copies of Phantom Flip, a 2-cost event, Thwart, Hero Response Thwart. After Ghost Spider uses a basic power, remove 5 threat from a scheme, max once per use, max 1 per basic power use. So when you thwart, when you attack, when you defend, you're going to be able to turn that into a removal of 5 threat at the cost of 2. I would say that this is a really good rate, and I would say that this comes with a lot of hidden cost that would cause this to be like, this is really good, but you do have to use a basic power. The thing is, with Gwen, that's not a problem. This might as there is no added cost. You need to have the ability to use a basic power, but that can come when you're thwarting, when you're attacking, when you're defending. And so this becomes a card that is live at all points in time. The only thing hindering you is a scheme that has 5 threat. And I would say that I feel comfortable if I'm just removing 3 threat at a minimum. Obviously, you want to maximize as much as possible. But if you can basically, what's that card called? Counterintelligence, I think, where it's a card that basically prevents an amount of threat being added to a scheme. If you can use this to get 3 threat, I feel like you're doing the base minimum. I would love to do 5. You always want to do 5. But if you find yourself not maximizing, don't be too critical of yourself, because like I said, this card is live at all times. I think that is one of the hard things about playing with Ghost Spider that I've noticed, is that you do live on the opponent. You do live during the villain phase a lot. And so you may be going into your turn with nothing to do because you did all of the fun stuff during the villain phase. And this is a good example. You have a 5 hand size. Suddenly you use up 3 of those cards to defend plus remove 5 threat. You did something, but it kind of makes your turns very much like, all right, I make a basic attack and I pass the turn. And I think that from a new player perspective, that can be hard to wrap your mind around, because you feel like your turn is when all of the things you're doing should happen. And she works a little counterintuitively that way. But I do think that once you take a step back, you realize just how much good you're doing, and you really can see the value of effects like this. Then we've got 3 copies of what I think might be my favorite card based solely on the art. The art in this pack is phenomenal. And I know that a lot of that is because it comes directly from the Marvel Comics, but this might be this might be one of my favorite pieces of art in the entire game. What is Ghost Kick? Ghost Kick is a 2-cost event, attack, hero response attack. Again, importantly, has the response there. After Ghost Spider makes a basic After Ghost Spider uses a basic power, deals 6 damage to an enemy, max 1 per basic power use. So just like Phantom Flip, this is going to give you something to do. Basically, everything I just said about Phantom Flip is true about Ghost Kick. You just need a face to punch, or I guess a face to kick, for this to be live. Other than that, you are just doing your normal thing. You are defending. You get 6 damage in there. You ready back up based off of Ghost Spider's dizzying reflexes ability. And yeah, this just becomes very, very fluid. I know in my X23 new player guide, I made some allusions to like playing like the perfect fighting game, and like this is like the same thing, but maybe this is like when you are in the zone and you are a speedrunner and you're just making everything happen and you're making these miraculous things. Ghost Spider will do that for you, because you will just be attacking, deal 6 damage to something on the side, ready back up, do another attack. It's phenomenal. You can turn a thwart into thwart for 1, deal 6 damage to a minion, and you feel really great. There are setbacks. There are points when your turn is going to seem not so lively, but that's at the cost of some pretty spectacular turns. And we've got 2 copies of Pirouette and Punch, a 2-cost event, skill, hero interrupt being important there. When a card is revealed from the encounter deck, deal damage to the villain equal to 1 more than the number of boost icons on this card. Cancel that card's when revealed effect. I have played this card incorrectly. I forgot to add the 1. But overall, like, this is just a nice way to cancel a when revealed effect that you don't like. Usually those come with, I would say my gut says that a strong when revealed effect probably comes with a heavy amount of boost icons. But I would also say that I've seen it in the past where a 7 out of 10 when revealed effect comes with like a 1 icon, only comes with 1 icon. And so I guess This is not always going to be live, but I do think that this has a lot of value to it, and I think that just being able to say no to the encounter deck can always be helpful. Importantly, this does not cause you to draw another card. I think that would be, for this card, that'd be a little weird. It's like, oh, so I'm going to like counter what you're doing and do this and do that, whatever. But cool card. I would say that I want to get a use out of this. I don't always get all the use out of it, and frequently you find yourself dealing 2 or 3 damage, and then you're just like, oh, I could have dealt 4, like the next encounter card. But either way, you want to flow through your hand anyway, so you're trying to use this up as much as possible. Decent enough card, but not too much more to say about that other than just kind of the cool factor. We got 2 copies of her web bracelets, a 2-cost upgrade, item tech, hero response. After you resolve an interrupt or response ability on an event, exhaust web bracelets, draw 1 card, max 1 per event. So importantly, the hero response on here is not going to be relevant to Ghost Spider because she's only looking for those abilities on events. But this is going to be right in tandem with what you want to be doing with Ghost Spider anyway, so you can turn that interrupt, that response, into a ready and an extra card that just keeps you flowing. That really plays into what Ghost Spider wants to do, and this does help to counteract the feel bad turns I was talking about before, where you empty out your hand during the villain phase and you have nothing to do during your turn. This can hopefully make it so that, maybe 50-60% of the turns where you did something during the villain phase, you still have something to do during your turn. Gwen wants to play pretty low to the ground. So if your hand gets bogged up with too many cards, you are going to have those dead turns. And so this can kind of help when you're being greedy and maybe you have a lot of 3-cost cards, a couple 4-cost cards. This can allow you to still be alive. This can allow you to still have something to do on your turn, even when you're interacting with every phase of the game. Then we have another favorite card of mine just for what it's able to do. We've got Web Binding, a 2-cost event superpower. It has the requirement of needing to use a mental resource to play it, and it is a hero interrupt, which on an event is important. When an enemy would activate, cancel that activation. If a minion's activation was canceled this way, deal 4 damage to that minion. So importantly, a lot of my testing with Gwen Stacy came down to going up against Claw just because he was simple enough and I wanted to be able to focus on her cards and not trying to make sure that I was playing the game correctly. This can be very strong against Claw because he draws 2 cards to, deal his attack to you or whatever. But this can also be really good because he's got some pretty sizable minions. I do like the trade-off here. You can go for really delaying a meaty attack from a villain at the cost of just canceling that activation, or you can cancel the activation of a minion and you're probably just taking them out right then and there. The only setback here is that this does not count as an attack, so any kind of thing that triggers off of you defeating a minion via an attack, this is not going to work. But I don't know if that's too nitpicky because I think most of the kind of effects that I'm thinking of probably don't get that into the weeds, and so it's just looking for, did you defeat a minion during the villain phase or what have you. This is kind of a weird tangent, but just I think that this probably is going to play well with a lot of stuff we saw come out of the Nightcrawler deck. I haven't tested that out yet, so I don't want to say that is the way you should be looking at this, but I do think that just in general this has different modes. I do think the requirement is notable, but I don't think that it hampers you too much, and I think it's a good card. I wouldn't say that it is my favorite card, and I don't know that it's necessarily always going to have something to do, although I would be surprised if this wasn't something that you were able to play pretty much every time that it's in your hand. But, buyer beware here. I realize that I sort of did this all in a weird order. Okay, so we have one copy of the event Parental Guidance, a 0-cost event. It is an alter ego action. If Gwen Stacy is in play, attach 1 event from your hand or discard pile face down to George Stacy. And if George Stacy is not in play, search your deck and discard pile for him and add him to your hand. So this is just a good way to find what I think is a very crucial card to Gwen Stacy. I kind of wrote him off at first, and after playing with him a few times just in preparation for this, I realized George is a good card that we will talk about in just a moment. And having this to either support him or help you find him is a good idea. I would even say that if this was, I wouldn't mulligan for this card. I wouldn't try to aggressively find this card. But if it happens to be in your opening hand, I do think that it is a good way to trade in this card for George Stacy to set yourself up for success. Other than that, it costs 0. So if you find yourself an alter ego, which I would say with Gwen Stacy, I want to spend a lot of time in hero form, but I do think that there is a fair reason to go to alter ego. One, to just like lower the amount of damage you're taking, but also because her alter ego does have an effect. But I do think that this card goes down in value because I don't plan to go to alter ego every turn. I don't plan to change forms every single turn with Gwen. I sort of want to stay in Ghost Spider form as much as possible. To me, this doesn't get the same amount of effect as it might with other heroes that will gladly go to alter ego every chance they have. And like I said, I kind of did this in a weird order, but we are now going to talk about George Stacy, who's one of the cards that Gwen Stacy, the alter ego, cares about. So George Stacy is a 1-cost support. It's a persona, and events attached to George Stacy may be played as though they were in your hand. Action: exhaust George Stacy, attach 1 event from your hand face down here to a maximum of 3. So this is just a way to store away events that you want to use under George Stacy. Luckily, you can play them even when you're in your alter ego form. You can attach them, you can play them when you're in your hero form. You can attach them when you're in your hero form. So he really does help a lot in that respect. I did not respect him enough prior to doing some experimenting, playing, like forcing him into play, saying every time I see him, I'm going to get him into play. He is the real deal. He will be very helpful, especially because, especially with a limited card pool like the deck that I'm going to show you that I tested with. Having this extra reliability adds extra cards to your hand, which is something that Gwen will gladly take. But let's talk about the last card, which once again was talked about by the alter ego, and that is Ticket to the Multiverse. So Ticket to the Multiverse is a 3-cost upgrade. With the action, remove Ticket to the Multiverse from the game. Discard your hand, shuffle your discard pile into your deck, draw up to your hand size, and ready each Ghost Spider card you control. And notably, it has 2 wild resources, which is going to be very, very helpful if this card just is not something you want to put into play at the moment. So this is a great way to just reset what is going on with your board. Not only do you get the chance to ready everything up, but you get to reshuffle up your deck without needing to take an encounter card, which can be really helpful when you are looking at maybe this is going to be your last hand before everything gets shuffled back up and you take that encounter card. This can be a nice way to circumvent that, to also just give you a fresh hand on the turn. Being an upgrade is also very helpful because then it can just sit there and you're not basically spending your entire hand to play this as an event. I think I've made that mistake before where I played this as an event or a glorified event where it's like, I need to put this down now because I need to do this now. But being able to just have this sit there and go, okay, when I'm ready to, I want to look at a new hand because this hand is not doing me any good. And that just helps you to find interrupts and resources. And I mean, you also do this in Alter Ego, I suppose. But like overall, this is a cool card. And I'm happy that we don't have a lot of effects like this because I feel like that would make Gwen less special. But I also think that this is an effect that maybe shouldn't be done all the time. But it's interesting to just see it. And it's nice to have some characters have this unique identity where they do have this as something they can do every game. But that is everything in the hero pack. Let's go look at the example deck, and then we will be talking about the obligation. All right, here we are looking at a deck for the 4-pack challenge. For the unfamiliar, this is a way of deck building that I had kind of voiced my concern with, and another person on Marvel CDB, Abysmal, went out of their way to basically start building in this style. And normally for these kinds of example decks, I'd like to highlight other creators, and I will freely say that this deck that I am talking about today, I built, but I did I took inspiration from this deck just because I wanted to build around aggression, because I felt like that was a aspect of Gwen that I hadn't really considered. And then as I was looking through this deck, even though it is a little bit dated, it is using card pool from 3 years ago, I do think that it shows off what Gwen was capable of as soon as she came out. And so I did then tailor that back so that using only the core set, Thor, Gamora, and the Sinister Motives box, you're able to build this deck. Does come with limitations, no question. There are things that, using this deck as an example, we do lose Skilled Strike, which I do think is a very good card. And if there was a little bit more in the Doctor Strange deck, I would have considered that, but then I ended up going with Gamora just because Gamora had some things that I thought would at least help to make this a little bit more approachable. Well, we won't get into this deck, but I will also have a link to this deck just as what I use as inspiration. But let's talk about what we have here. And this is the deck that I also tested Gwen Stacy with, just to kind of refamiliarize myself. And it's pretty basic, I would say. Nick Fury, you know him, you love him. He is a pretty staple card, and with this deck having the limitations it does, he was an easy include just because he's just a nice thing to have, and he can take a turn and make it into, you can save yourself from some damage. You can just get some scheme removed, maybe remove 2 threat from the scheme, 4 threat overall, draw yourself some cards, deal some damage. You know what he does. Just with the smaller card pool, he was kind of the last include, just as a thing that needed to happen. But then we've got Spider-Man Hobie Brown, who, if you were playing with a Web Warrior, he is a bona fide staple. You should just have him because he is going to do work, going to come into play. Obviously, you can only play him as a Web Warrior, but when he leaves play, and in this case, it's probably going to be from being defeated, you discard the top 3 cards in the encounter deck and deal damage to the villain equal to the number of boost icons discarded this way. And while Wiccan can whiff, Hobie Brown just seems like he's incapable of whiffing when it comes to this ability. And so I have dealt like 7 damage off this, which is always nice. You maybe thwart for 2 to just kind of get that double consequential damage. And then you just take out the villain. You might take out half a stage of the villain. And obviously that's kind of a little pie in the sky, but the truth is Hobie Brown sometimes can just be a phenomenal ally to just have on your bench waiting to come into the game. Then we've got Peter Parker Spider-Man, who I included in this deck because he was basic and because it's just one more way for us to be readying up Gwen. Maybe it's a way to power through Hobie Brown if you need to, get an attack in, get a thwart in, have him basically come down and just do a bunch of stuff and deal some damage. Either way, the requirement is definitely something to take into account. Everything else after that, you get a pretty good 3-cost ally with 3 health, and he is giving you extra activations for your Web Warrior. You've always got Gwen, so you're always going to have some character that you can target with this and ready up. And like I said, just give Gwen extra readies. She loves being readied up, and that is helped by Peter Parker. We've got Chase Them. Oops, what am I doing here? We've got Chase Them Down, a core set card, but it is helpful in the fact that it is a response. And in testing with this deck, I do think that it is a strong contender. Obviously, there are times when this is going to be a dead card. You just don't have a scheme to remove from because you've done pretty good threat management, even in aggression. A Ghost Kick can very easily defeat an enemy. This is really good to sit on George Stacy and just be a remove 2 threat from a scheme when you need to. And yeah, just being able to like Ghost Kick something. And obviously at that point, you're overdoing the responses. But even if it's just like this is your Phantom Kick, essentially, where it's like you you attack, you defeat a minion, then you do this so that you can ready back up Gwen and go about your business. This just helps you to stay fluid. And yeah, it's what aggression's going to need. You want some threat mitigation. And if you're doing solo, you know, I will say this deck did not fare great in solo. I played against Claw. She did decently. It's just at some point you hit a point where you might have some dead hands and you're sort of just like hoping that your next hand is going to be something good. And this is the kind of card that can keep you in the game. We've got Emergency. This truly may have been the picks like 36 through 39 in terms of filling up this deck. With the limitations that we have for the card pool, this is a nice interrupt that is always live, that does help you in aggression to mitigate threat. It is a card that is very easy to sub out when you get down the line because it's not the best card ever. But with what you've got, this is a card that fits into Gwen's niche, and I think will help you to once again just stay fluid. Then we've got Mean Swing, which really drove a lot of it. It's one of the things I liked about the inspiration for this deck, and it's something that I think works really well. One, it's an interrupt. It deals additional damage. You can use the weapons that we've got on hand. If I could just get away without the core set, I would have just found another way to get another weapon into the game via another aggression hero pack. It's not the case. Maybe it's a really simple answer, but like this is just such a cool card for 0. It gives you an additional 3 to your attack, and yeah, just at the cost of just having a weapon out. And if you're doing it right, this should not be too hard. And this is also another card that is easy to put under Gwen Stacy, so that when you do have a weapon and you are ready to do this, you can just get that extra attack out and be on your way. All the basic resources. Hall of Heroes. This is a card that I really enjoy in a lot of my aggression decks. Whenever you defeat a minion, you put a glory counter onto Hall of Heroes, and as an alter ego action, you may exhaust Hall of Heroes, remove 3 counters from it, and draw 3 cards. So this really helps with heroes that have not a stellar hand size in hero form, so that you can be an alter ego form, draw those 3 cards, flip back over, and you just have a great hand. And with Gwen being the way that she is, where sometimes she can just have dead turns because you did all of your stuff on the villain phase, this can help to alleviate that, because you can, I guess, go into your turn, switch to hero form from alter ego, and just have a very bombastic turn with a above average hand size. Helicarrier. This was kind of just a card that I needed to sort of just slot in. It does have its uses. Oh, I realized I didn't even talk about 2 of the minions. I'm sorry. We'll get back to that in just a second. It does have its use because there are some higher cost cards in the deck. This is just a good way to smooth out your curve, and yeah, just it does what it needs to. I guess additionally, unlike Miles and Peter, Gwen does not have any resource generators. Then we've got Web of Life and Destiny. This is a card that I don't know is going to have a whole lot of use in the moment, although as you expand your card pool out and you take in more cards from the Sinister Motives wave, this is going to become more and more helpful, because there are other basic allies in like Spider-Ham and in the SPDR deck that this will just, you can swap out some of the allies that I think even that I kind of coasted over, and just really take advantage of this. You get to play it for free, and as a response, after a Web Warrior ally leaves play, you choose a player, that player draws a card. So it's just a way to, it's really helpful in multiplayer, it's really helpful in single player. You lose Kobe Brown, you deal a bunch of damage, you draw a card, you feel great. Doubling back real quick, both of these, actually, are both of these core set? They're not, okay. So core set Tigra, when she attacks and defeats a minion, she heals the damage, so she's just got to survive the attack, but she attacks for 2. Decent enough ally, not necessarily my first pick, but the allies were the hardest part of this deck. Just trying to like fit within the confines. The allies were the hardest part of this deck, and this is just kind of just a nice body to have, and she does have some advantages. And then Valkyrie, another just valuable ally. She comes into play. She deals 2 damage to a minion, 3 instead if you used an energy resource. This is just a nice way to soften up some minions, make them a little bit easier to take out. If you've got a very big minion and you just want to ghost kick it away, this can help, once again, just soften everything up. I guess that'd be a very expensive turn if you were playing Valkyrie and also ghost kick. I don't know how you got such a big hand size unless you did some really weird Hall of Heroes shenanigans, but either way. Then Battle Fury doubled up on this, 2 copies. Play under any player's control, max 1 per player. After your hero attacks and defeats a minion, deal 1 damage to your hero, discard Battle Fury, and ready up your hero. This is just another way for Ghost Spider to ready up, and she loves readying up so much that I just wanted to make sure that I could do that as well as possible. And I'll say that in the test games that I did, this was helpful just to kind of be that extra ready when you've already used up her responsibility. 1 copy of Combat Training just gives your hero +1 attack. This is great because you're having 3 attack and 3 defense makes Gwen very good and really makes her very direct. I did not do a lot of thwarting in my test decks or my test games because Combat Training came into play pretty quickly and just made it so that you could just make these very bombastic 6 to 9 damage turns, and you can just churn through the villain really easily if you're doing everything right. Then we've got Godslayer, one of the weapons, and in some scenarios this is a godsend. It is a restricted weapon that costs 3 and has a hero interrupt. When your hero makes a basic attack against a unique enemy, exhaust Godslayer, your hero gets 2+2 attack for this attack. So this already is a mini version of Mean Swing. It can make attack at scenarios where you have a lot of unique minions. This is so powerful. Against like the Marauders, this is so powerful. It's just a nice way to, like I said, have a Mean Swing without needing to always have Mean Swing on hand. And, obviously it's not giving you a natural boost all the time, but there are so many unique minions that this is doing a very good job, quite a bit. And Yarnbjorn out of the Thor pack, another restricted weapon. This one costs 1. Response: after your hero attacks an enemy, you may spend a strength resource, deal 2 damage to an enemy. So you can send that damage wherever you want. This gets around guard. This can help you just mitigate, take out 1 minion, take out another minion, and just spread damage. But yeah, overall, just I think this package of these 2 weapons can be very helpful. But overall, I was very happy with this deck. It has its flaws, but I think that in terms of first steps, this is a cool way to utilize Gwen in aggression, which I'm just happy to see that the aspects are opening up because I had a very limited protection mindset with her, and I'm happy to be wrong. But let's go talk about the obligation and the Nemesis set and wrap this up. All right, and we are back, and let's talk about the obligation, which is Worried Father. Obligation: give to the Gwen Stacy player. Search your deck, hand, discard pile, and play area for George Stacy and set him aside. Attach this obligation to him. Alter ego action: exhaust Gwen Stacy and remove this obligation from the game. Add George Stacy to your hand. So this reminds me an awful lot of Cyclops' obligation, where it basically goes and finds you the visor for you. Obviously, this can be a setback if you are presently using George Stacy and you had a bunch of stuff set aside by him. But I think that overall this can be a very nice way to just give you an additional way to get George Stacy. Don't like the setback, but at the same time, this is, I would say, a pretty soft obligation. And I think it just does a good job of messing with your plans if you've already got them. And then also just kind of being a tutor for George Stacy if you happen to need it. Either way, I don't know that I would necessarily prioritize getting rid of this. And that's hard to say because George Stacy is so powerful. But I think this isn't the kind of obligation that's going to mess everything up. I guess it can mess you up if you've got 3 events under George Stacy and suddenly you just lost them. But if you were already playing without George Stacy, this is just a get in when you can, and it's just nice. But, that's kind of just what an obligation is sometimes. Then let's move on to the Nemesis minion, and we're going to talk about the Nemesis minion with the side scheme right away because we can take them both into account. So we've got the Lizard, and I believe this is the Peter Parker Lizard, so it's the alternate universe version of Peter Parker who turned himself into the Lizard. Best friends with Gwen Stacy. He is a minion with 1 scheme, 3 attack, the Brute and Creature traits, and 5 hit points with a forced interrupt of when the villain phase begins, heal 1 damage from the Lizard. So I'm not too concerned about this because Gwen naturally has a way to just dole out a bunch of damage via the Ghost Kick. Is that really her only way to deal damage? Obviously she can just attack, but the Ghost Kick is the only way to definitively just take the Lizard out. But like I said, I'm not too worried about him. But let's look at the side scheme just to get a little bit more context as to what we're taking on. That is Regenerative Research, a side scheme with 5 threat, and the Forced Interrupt when the villain phase begins, heal 1 damage from each enemy. So I would prioritize getting rid of the side scheme before I would prioritize getting rid of the Lizard. Obviously the Lizard's got 3 attack. He is a factor. You do want to put him aside as soon as possible, but I would much rather not be fighting a clock of regenerate 2 damage to the Lizard, regenerate 1 damage to each enemy. That seems much harder. And actually the side scheme is, I think, a much more of a kick to the teeth. So I would prioritize getting rid of that, maybe with your, what's that called? Maybe with your Phantom Flip. This is a good thing to aim at. But yeah, overall, I think this is a really interesting 1-2 punch. And I think the side scheme just is heads and shoulders more impactful than the Lizard. Maybe I'm wrong, and I'm willing to be wrong. Then we've got a copy of Experimental Injection attached to it is an attachment attached to the minion with the most remaining hit points. If you cannot, this card gains Surge. Attached minion gains the creature trait and gets +4 hit points. So this is a nice way to just beef up a minion real fast. And what I like about this is it's the most remaining hit points, so there's not really too much to debate here. Obviously, it's got to go on to a minion. If you keep the board pretty clean, then this isn't going to be a big issue. The Lizard suddenly having 9 hit points is probably a good reason why you do want to take that into consideration. Like, if the Lizard suddenly had 9 hit points, would that change his threat level? And I think it would. But overall, yeah, just cool card. And, anytime they can augment a minion in an interesting way, I'm all for that. And the last cards is 2 copies of In Cold Blood, a treachery with when revealed, when revealed, the Lizard attacks you. You cannot play events until after this attack resolves. If no attack was made this way, this card gains Surge. That actually seems like a big attack to the Achilles heel for Gwen here. You can't use any response or interrupt abilities, and that seems like a nice counterbalance to her. Overall, the Lizard's got 3 attack, so this is going to be a strong attack, and I guess additionally, there's no stipulation that this is stopped by you being an alter ego. So this is just going to be an attack. So once again, like I've said before with other Nemesis packs, once this is in the encounter deck, you do need to take it into consideration. If the Lizard attacks you, would you be defeated in alter ego? That's something you just got to factor in. But overall, like I said, cool card, but it's not going to come up in every game, so don't worry too much about it. And that is Gwen, aka Ghost Spider. And yeah, I think that she is a awesome hero. I'm happy that she's in the game. I love what Fantasy Flight did with her. I think that she has a really unique identity that is kind of tertiary to other characters, overlaps a little bit here or there. She does care about events, but she cares about specific events, which I think makes deck building with her into something unique because you're looking at cards that other players might not necessarily value as much. She's going to value more. And I think that overall, just any hero that can make you play Marvel Champions a little bit differently, make you value things a little bit differently, is always a cool thing. Until next time, when we talk about another Web Warrior, I will see you then, and thanks for stopping by.